Thank you so much for staying for day 2 afternoon. Unfortunately, I'm speaking, and you're going to have to be inflicted on with this. Okay. My name is Notnotcharlie. Use logic to figure out my real name. It's not difficult. I'm on GitLab's internal red team. And helping me out with sound effects is Tristan Reed. He was going to be on stage, but then it turned out AV effects are best from the back. So thank you, Tristan. So I'm a former developer. I now do adversary emulation against GitLab infrastructure and products. And so offensive operations is what I do now. And I would like to present to you one of Edgar Allan Poe's lesser-known works, The Tale of the Curiously Empty String. I would like to add that this is an organically written AI-free poem. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I doom-scrolled, sleepy, weary, over many a mundane post of social media lore. Such nights I worked to borrow the time until the morrow. Incident responder was a role alone I bore. Essential business fable that all is good and stable. Our startups deserving of more VC funding than before. In my stupor, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. I'm reminded briefly of that poem with that bird, but that was based so long ago and clearly was absurd. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door. That scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep in that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken. Standing there was I, sleep broken, and the stillness gave no token. In that darkness, nothing more. Back into chamber turning, my sleeplessness abjuring, soon again I heard that tapping, somewhat louder than before. Then I realized that tapping within my chamber rapping, it was a simple app ping, which I'd failed to see before. My workbox I awoken with a flicker, darkness broken, the graphs and logs still open, and a ping I can't ignore. Just an app ping, nothing more. On that page highlighted, I immediately cited a single field, which, never empty, beckoned me to explore. Much I marvel this wee empty string, our JavaScript defeated. Our application's logic should have seen this string deleted. Yet here it was, and twixt its quotes, a void like darkness seated. Nothing. Not even a null character it bore. Nothing in its middle, simply nothing, nothing more. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing of this string whose emptiness now burned into my bosom's core. A puzzle truly vexing, sufficiently perplexing. In vain I turned to Stack Overflow and ChatGPT-4. Rubbish answers, nothing more. As my weary eyes cast over, past graphs and charts moreover, nothing leapt at me until I saw within our logger store the logger row in question some maths, and on reflection, all authored by a user named with the username Lenore. Late night maths was something more. Perhaps I thought they're in Singapore? Investigating deeper, scrolling up to find a sweeper? Why had you sent 8 times 8 to every field, Lenore? All these requests I witnessed, each in fields of varying fitness, many log fields that I saw, they all had maths galore. Need a calculator there, Lenore? Just in case you didn't know the answer's 64. I looked at logs more dated, my curiosity not sated, until the log file showed a web response containing 64. Scrolled back to logs most recent, saw something quite startlingly indecent. It struck such terror through my heart and shook me to my core. Seems Lenore had set their eyes on this endpoint serving Python. An internal endpoint meant for devs. It was then I really swore. Wretch, I cried, frustrated, this presence suddenly I hated. From this evil hacker, I must protect our precious data store. I must protect it from Lenore. In my chamber, hacker haunted, Lenore kept on quite undaunted. My heartbeat thundered in my chest as past defenses they just tore. Python hierarchy walking, system calls they tried unblocking. Every step they took came close to our data store. Our precious data store. This vulnerability persisted, and why, pray tell, existed? Some developer had left a handy endpoint here before. Laziness and nothing more. To cease this hacker's sublime mocking, I incanted user blocking. Get thee back out into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Take thy form from out my system and away from our data store. Malevolent session did I disband as I just smashed that block command. And we should never hear again from any user named Lenore, as I cried out, nevermore! Okay, what was that? Okay, so that happened. So, in retrospect, we have a late-night incident responder. They're very tired. They see an empty string in the logs. It's a bit curious. So they go digging deeper. They find a templating attack where attacker is trying to send maths equations to see what comes back evaluated so they can send arbitrary code. They find evidence of this attacker then performing a hierarchy traversal in Python on an endpoint left there by a developer. And they block the user and think, oh, that's done. So just in case this is not familiar to you, this is not mine, by the way, this is not on you, and we'll get into that. The hacker's Python code, we start with this empty string, spooky. We then move towards this string class itself and go into the method resolution order. You get to the top of the hierarchy, then find a subclass with the catch warnings, which we then call the module, and then you can import the OS built in, which then allows you to do RCE. So this is not a new vulnerability. It was introduced 10 years ago, so it's not new, right? So why am I talking about it? Well, vulnerabilities always exist, and people can reintroduce them if they're not careful. And systematically eliminating known vulnerabilities is very important. And sometimes people aren't thinking of something. Sometimes 0 days get lots and lots of attention. It's good to also think about the existing vulnerabilities and how to avoid them. And sometimes developers accidentally do that. So we have this incident responder. Did they do the right thing? Yes, in the immediate case. But they sort of blocked the user, said, well, the developer was just lazy, and then moved on. It's not the end. We would say in proper incident response, you don't want to be solving the same incident over and over and over again. So you systematically solve the problem rather than just solving the immediate problem. So we have the attack vector is still wide open. Lenore can come back. They can come from a different IP or a different user if they need to. So we need to do a thorough solution, which is evict the attacker, find out what other footholds they may have gotten, check for things like backdoors and SSH keys, cron jobs, C2 beacons, whatever, rotate any credentials, and perform a threat hunt, just in case someone else found and exploited that. So this is what we would call a thorough incident response. So when we apply this kind of systemic solving of these things, well, if a developer is going to keep doing this, then we want to solve that side of it as well, where the vulnerability was introduced. So instead of just addressing the symptom, which is some insecure code, we have not diagnosed the wider problem, which is a process gap and misaligned priorities. So in the same way as banning the user doesn't really solve the core issue, we blaming the developer and having them take training doesn't address the root cause either. So it isn't to say that training never works, because sometimes it's good for anyone to be aware of what to watch out for, but just in this case, it's insufficient. Having to address each repeatable event just by addressing by not addressing the root cause, it just doesn't scale, because you don't want to be asking every developer every time they do something. You also don't want to be blaming developers, because if they find that security means judgment and security means blame, they're not going to talk to the security team if they're wondering about how to do something safely, or if they notice something, or if they think they've done something wrong. It just means that they won't collaborate with the security team if they feel like they're going to be judged when they do so. So as a result, if we're doing blame-based culture, the security team then has to keep doing things piecemeal. If developers are finding that they don't have an easy way of doing what they want to do, they'll keep sidestepping it. And this goes for all users, but like developers have a lot of power because they can spin up code and do a lot of powerful things, and they're often given that by the organization. They might use personal accounts, shadow IT tools, and that to avoid being told off, and they just won't tell you. So when you see the same type of vulnerability being introduced, and not just like in the code itself, but maybe like either endpoints or something else, we want to make sure that we have a people problem, not necessarily a systems problem. You want to think about why this is happening in the first place and dig into that. So let's talk to it was a wild idea, talking to the developer and ask them, so what were you wanting to do? Why did you open this endpoint? And doing so non-judgmentally is really key here. So the incident responder, yes, when you can be frustrated at the time, that's understandable. But you don't want that to get out of your incident call and make the developer feel bad. So the incident responder chalked it up to laziness, but the developer will likely keep doing insecure things because their priority is get the thing working. And if they want to do something more securely, it takes more work. And if doing things the secure way takes a lot of extra effort for them, they'll find a shortcut. And that's the unfortunate reality of these things. So if the developer is under pressure to deliver something very soon, if they need to verify a production edge case with production-like data, and they have a queue of bugs to do, and they're under pressure to deliver these things, and the secure path is too hard, they will take shortcuts. And I mean, it's an organizational problem, but it doesn't mean that we have to put up with it. So the big thing that I really want to emphasize is people do things that make sense to them, and this is something that I believe about lots of things. Sometimes when we're frustrated with somebody, when saying, "Oh, they're just insert thing here," and we try to project what we think their motivations are, but the best thing is to ask them. The developer might have been making a reasonable decision based on their priorities, their knowledge, and their available tools. If they want to get the thing working, and they'll make secure choices as the path of least resistance, if that's what's available to them. So security engineers tend to think of it in attack vectors, whereas developers think in features and code maintainability in that. So neither perspective is wrong, but we need to work together for that goal, for both goals, not in opposition. So developers are not security engineers generally. They might have a lot of security knowledge, but it's not their focus. So the developer might be thinking, well, it's fully patched, the endpoint is unpublished, no one knows about it, who's going to find it? They might think it's temporary, I'll get rid of it later, and then they forget. They might think it's undocumented, therefore safe. Some developers think like, oh, all you can do is like a really limited set of actions, so it's fine. Whereas an offensive security engineer will totally find some way to sidestep any protections. So to help align the development priorities, which is get the thing working and get the feature shipped, and securities, which is please don't open a security hole, it requires organizational support. So in this case, we can help all developers by investing, and this is organizationally, investing in engineering tooling that allows them to do what they want to do safely, and it make it easy to do and easy for them to find how to do it, so they won't roll their own thing. So, for example, if this developer was really interested in a test sandbox where they can test against production-like code, we can use infrastructure as code to spin something up that's repeatable, that's disconnected from production infrastructure, that has seeded data, so it's kind of prod-like, and spins down automatically, so the developer doesn't have to think about it. And the less cognitive overhead that exists, the more successful it's going to be. So if we ask people to think about something before they do something and that sort of thing, it's probably going to fail. So the less they have to think, the more you can offload that to a known good set of processes that are semi-automatic, the more successful this is going to be. So if you can make the easy path and the secure path the same path, then we can avoid shortcuts. It's kind of like desire paths, if you know what those are. If you have buildings and you have people will walk where they want to walk, and you have this nice paved road, but people aren't using them because they'd rather go on the grass because it's shorter. So it's like that. So ultimately, we're all in the same team, and we all want to stay safe. Security can be a bit of a silo. So oftentimes we work on things that maybe we can't share too widely. Red team, the team that I'm on, is a silo within a silo, so we can't share what we're doing most of the time with other security engineers, and certainly not with the rest of the company. So we have to make extra effort to connect with the rest of the company, which we do, because GitLab has quite transparent culture. So we try to do that, and I think it's quite successful. But it's ultimately the security team's responsibility to help users do things securely. Developers and other nerds, I mean, nerds doesn't have to be computer nerds, it could just be anyone, are needed to help with secure solutions to work for everyone. So they can help you figure out, is this the right thing? Will it solve my problem? Like, talk to the people who are doing the thing so you can make sure that you understand their needs. Fellow nerds will be able to understand why, and they appreciate the pragmatism. That's what I found with developers. They're very appreciative that it's pragmatic. So this is difficult. It's not an easy thing to solve. It requires investment. So we can iterate and we can start small. So culture changes. We could do things like encourage developers or nerds or anyone really in your organization to talk to the security team just in very informal situations where they can talk to each other and get to know each other. Turns out security people are just like regular people, slightly spicy, and they're nice people, and they like memes and cats and whatever. And so having these kinds of shared social channels can be really good. And having an easy way to engage security in a way that isn't like a ticketing system. So you can ask informal questions, get help with things, but in kind of in an informal way. And the answers are kind, non-judgmental, and genuine engagement. So instead of, oh gosh, I have to ask security, this feels scary, it's like just open. You can see other people asking stuff that they may need to know. We have a channel like that, and it's really helpful. And having some accessible guidance, if you can, on how to do things securely. So we have that in the GitLab handbook page. We have quite a bit of guidance on having to do that. So it doesn't mean, awkward team building events, ticketing systems, that sort of thing. We want to foster and encourage genuine connection between different divisions of the company. So the other thing we can do is identify a single recurring vulnerability and just solve that systemically, like start with one problem. But these two things together, I think, will go a long way to helping security teams engage with other parts of the company, and then they can understand each other. So back to our very tired incident responder. So previously, they just blocked the user, got grumpy with the developer, and go back to waiting for the next alert, which is not far off. And ideally, they would remediate the threat, which we already know is the best way to do that, reach out to the developer and ask them, what were you trying to accomplish and how can I help? So that this doesn't happen again. They create a ticket or some other kind of ticket for provide test endpoints for development teams and involve the development teams in creating a solution that works for them, and partnering with the dev tooling teams. If there was one, involve the developers with it, and so it's a collaborative solution to something that the developers need anyway. And they'll be really grateful that they now have a way of doing things that's more secure and that they are involved in and they're invested in. So it's less likely to be a disconnected solution for them. Which one do you want to work in? I know which one I want to work in. Anyway, thank you so much.
I am a super genius.